Flat 2D terrain maps for games like Warhammer 40k and Star Wars Shatterpoint are boring, and with my newfound obsession over Marvel Crisis Protocol, I decided to do something about it. Today we're kicking off a brand new series where I'm going to be building various modular terrain board tiles for a game called Marvel Crisis Protocol. In each episode, I'm going to be sharing tips and tricks, show you how to achieve quick and awesome effects, and each tile is going to be entirely different from the last one. Today's tile is going to be focused on a gas station on the corner of a street featuring a crushed car, a scratch-made gas station, and tons of fun little details. What's good, minicrafters? Originally, I was planning on building one massive Marvel Crisis Protocol board, like for the whole table, but the more I thought about it, the more that sounded like a project that I would start and never finish. So instead, I'm going to be breaking it up. Today's tile is a gas station because I've got this little gas pump piece, a crushed car with a pump smashed on top of it, and I'm going to be scratch building the gas station with a playable rooftop. The idea is that by the end of this series, I'll have a number of tiles that I can set side by side however I want to have a playable MCP board. So if you're playing Marvel Crisis Protocol, or any skirmish game really, and you want to steal some of the ideas from today's video, go for it. First things first, I need to figure out what I want the layout of this section to be. I have the crushed car, the gas pump, a normal car, and the floor plan template for the gas station building. Now, as I move the terrain around, I'm keeping in mind not just how it's going to look on the board, is it balanced or not, but also the playability of it. This is going to be a usable terrain board that minis are going to need to be able to easily move around on. And if I have the crashed car too close to the building, then minis aren't going to be able to move around that or between those pieces very well. I'm just using the mini bases themselves so that I know how much space I'm going to need. Once I'm happy, I'm going to grab a pencil, I'm going to outline the various things so I know how to arrange them later on. The next step is making the gas station. I take my styrene template and I'm going to cut out a piece of thin cardstock to act as my ceiling for the building. I'm then going to take a piece of basswood, I'm going to use my cardstock to measure the length of the walls on the basswood. And I'm using a pencil to mark the lengths so that I can label those later on so I don't accidentally mix them up. I then take my X-Acto knife, I'm going to run that along the wood a couple of times to get a nice clean cut at each interval. Pro tip for you, basswood and balsa wood. Basswood is soft like balsa wood is, but it's sturdier. So if I'm building a diorama or a scene or I'm doing things like terrain, I'm going to use basswood for structural things and balsa wood for more detail work. I then grab my gel super glue and I start to glue the walls into place around the cardstock. Now the gel super glue is stronger and it's going to hold the walls where I need them to be while it dries. I'm going to have that link down below if you want to pick some up for yourself. I'm also going to use a spare piece of wood to clean up any glue that spills out from the corners and the edges where each wall meets the next one. I'm going to set the gas station aside to dry, and while that's drying, I grab my terrain pieces and start to cut out the areas where I want them to be on the board. Lots of people simply place the terrain on top of their board, and that's fine, but I'm trying to create a singular environmental terrain board for my games. Some of the terrain in Marvel Crisis Protocol is playable, like the cars can be thrown, dumpsters can be used to attack opponents, things like that. Those I won't be gluing down since those can be in tons of different areas and spots depending on how you want to set your board up for that game. But the crushed car terrain is just that. It's not usable in game, it's just for looks, so that I will glue into place on the board. While I could have this section of the board just be a big parking lot, I decided to have this gas station be on the side of a road. To create some convincing scale road, I'm going to be using cork board. I used the not crushed car to get a sense of the road width. On the board next to it would be another equally spaced cork road so that each one is a lane for the cars. After figuring out the dimensions, I cut out a spot for the crushed car to fit into. The cork cuts super easily and I used my X-Acto knife for this to get just the right shape. Now I had to remove a layer of the foam board below it so that the cork road wasn't raised up above the rest of the parking lot area. Moving back to my now dry gas station building, I need to make some doors and windows for the building. To help with scale, I take the half-destroyed building that came in the corset box and find some strips of basswood and balsa wood that closely match the dimensions of the doors and the windows on that. From there, I grab some styrene sheets and create some rectangles that are the same shape and size of the doors and windows. The styrene is going to act as the glass and the wood's going to be the window and door frames. I then break out my hot glue gun and start adding strips of the wood to the styrene to look like crossbars and frames. To ensure the sides line up and that I'm getting 90-degree angles, I sand down the sides prior to gluing on the wooden edges. The styrene sands faster than you think, so don't press too hard. Once the doors and windows are done, I hot glue those in place on the building. I put one door and window on the front, and the other door is on the back as a rear entrance. Now, I'm running into an issue here that I'm not really sure how to solve. I I have this ugly seam where the cardstock roof meets the wooden walls on my building. I decided that the best way to hide this ugly connection was to take some cardstock and glue that along the seam with some sticking up above the roof to act as some sort of lip or railing. I was able to use some old nippers to easily cut the cardstock to length, and because they have a flush side, I could get right up to the edge of the corners without awkwardly futzing around with some scissors. Next up is building a small cover for the gas pumps, because God forbid we have our heroes and our villains getting rained on when they're filling up their whatever mobiles. I quickly cut up a couple pieces of foam with my hot wire cutting table, and then I add some cardstock strips to the edges of that foam to match the gas station roof design. I also add a foam column down the middle of the platform, and that's going to serve as the support. I also add some balsa wood offshoots under the platform to help convey a sense of actual support. Now this next part is a little bit arduous to do, but I think it's 100% worth it because the outcome and the way it looks is incredible. And that's adding AK Interactive's concrete paste to the walls of the gas station. This stuff is like magic in a bottle because it has the perfect scale grit and texture that mimics concrete when it dries. I'm just using a palette knife to spread this along the walls like frosting on a cake. The reason it's a bit arduous is because the paste likes to pull and peak as you spread, which can be helpful if you're trying to build up shape and depth, but in my case, I want this to be as layered and as even as possible on these walls. Otherwise, it can look a little bit like a textured wall, which I don't want. But I have a helpful tip that I'm going to share with you in just a second to get your walls looking just right. I'm careful as I go around the windows and doors so that I don't accidentally get the paste on the smooth styrene, which is supposed to be smooth glass. And that trick to get even texture on large surfaces like these walls requires you to wait for the paste to fully dry, which can take 3 to 4 hours to fully cure. After it dries, you can take some sandpaper and carefully sand down any high spots or brush marks. I recommend using a fine to medium grit sandpaper for this, somewhere between 240 and 400 grit. If you use a coarser sandpaper, it can tear the cured paste unevenly. Back on the board, I'm going to be using my ruler to add a sidewalk to the XPS foam right along the Cork road. And it's easy to do this with XPS foam, like the green stuff that I'm using here. I start by taking my hobby knife and I'm going to run that down the length of the foam a couple of times. I'm not trying to cut deep, rather I'm only going about halfway down the length of the blade. From there, I take a mechanical pencil without the graphite sticking out. I'm going to run that down the crack to create a bigger line in the foam. I also used a miniature base to get an even space between the expansion points in the sidewalk. Easy peasy. Not easy peasy, because turns out I made another mistake a few steps ago, and it's going to require me to crack the board literally in half to remedy it, and I don't know how that's going to go. Remember how I took a layer of the foam off where the Cork road was placed? Well, I didn't take into account that the Cork has thickness too, so I needed to make the foam recessed by double the depth so that the Cork sat below the surface of the parking lot foam. Right now, it's all flush and level. So I used a hobby knife to carefully remove the Cork, and then I cracked the board apart because I need to remove another layer from it. I quickly run that through my hot wire cutter table to take off a layer of foam that's the same thickness as the cork board is deep. I then hot glue the now newly shaved down piece of foam back to the board and glue down the cork strip on top of that. Now the road is below the rest of the ground, creating a natural curb and transition of material. Surely I won't make any more mistakes, right? This next part is fun because I'm going to be weathering up the surface of the parking lot in a couple of different ways. First, I'm going to be adding some cracks to the sidewalk with my hobby knife. First cutting the crack, and then using my pencil to widen those cracks. Second, I'm going to be taking a balled up piece of tin foil, and I'm going to be stabbing and mashing and bashing that all over the board randomly to give it texture, dents, and divots. And third, I'm going to grab 2 pencils, and I'm just going to start poking the tar out of this parking lot surface. Get it? Tar like parking lot? Because it's a... The pencil stabs look like random bullet holes in the concrete from previous battles. And lastly, I'm going to grab my hobby knife. I'm going to start to slice some larger divots and craters into the surface of the foam. This is going to simulate larger blast marks where energy bolts hit or explosives went off. With all the fun wear and tear done, I'm now going to be moving on to what I think is the most important part of this entire process, and that is sealing the foam. If you don't do this, when you go to paint the foam, it can either show through your paint, and that's going to show the color of the foam, or it's going to get eaten away if you're using any sort of enamel or aerosol spray, or it can get dinged and damaged easily when you're playing on the surface. But it's super easy to do, and this is the recipe that I use when I seal my foam always. I take matte Mod Podge, any color paint so I can see if I've missed any spots, and then some water, and I mix all of that up in a cup. Now, I made my mixture quite thin because I'm going over a flat surface and it has lots of cool weathered up detail that I just added, and I don't want to lose that detail. While the sealant layer dries, I have 2 extra bits of detail that I want to add to the gas station and the pump cover before I move on to adding all the debris, rubble, and other ground cover material. The first is this little sign that came with the other building from the starter box, and I think it would look good on the side of the gas pump cover structure. I cut off the little nubs on the back and I sanded those spots flat. I then grabbed my hot glue gun and I attached that to the edge of the roof, and Bob's your uncle. The next detail is this 3D printed ladder that I had from another build that I never used, and I decided to glue that to the back of the gas station so that you could have access to the roof. With the gas station now done, I take my hot glue gun and I'm going to glue that in place on the tile board. I also add the gas pump and the crushed car to the board as well. I decided to leave the gas pump cover structure off for now so that when I go to paint everything, I can easily access it and get to it. I'll attach that later on. Now for the step that's going to unite all of the pre-made terrain and the stuff that I've made into one cohesive scene. The debris and the dirt. I'm starting by taking a variety of sizes of ballast, some small rocks, and a very dark material that I'll tell you about in a minute. I'm starting around the crushed car and adding PVA glue around the seam and sprinkling medium ballast all around it. I also added a few small rocks, and I sprinkled on some small ballast to help smooth the transition of parking lot and road to the crushed, impacted car. Switching over to the gas station, I'm going to be using that very dark mystery material that I just mentioned, which is something a little unusual. Coffee grounds. Now, I dried these out in the oven a while back, and they have this wonderful mixture of fine, medium, and large size granules. I have a really simple 3-step approach to adhere any sort of rubble to any of my dioramas. I first sprinkle whatever I'm gluing down, in this case the coffee grounds, then I give that area a misting of isopropyl alcohol to break the surface tension. Then as a final step, I either spray or use a dropper bottle to apply my homemade scenic glue to that rubble or debris. Now, depending on the size of the area, a spray bottle can help cover a large area at a time, or in this case, I'm going to be using the dropper bottle to get up nice and close to the base of the gas station wall and the ground. I made a whole video about how to make your own homemade scenic glue. It's super quick and easy. I'm going to have it linked in the upper right hand corner and down in the description below if you want to check it out. While I have all my detritus and glue out, I grab some random bits of material that I keep from my builds, and I randomly add that to the roof of the gas station. This wouldn't be all nice and clean in the real world, so it's not going to be here. I also sprinkle some fine ballast on that as well, and I'm going to spray everything down with some isopropyl alcohol, and then my scenic glue to attach it all. I use my dropper bottle to spot glue a few of the larger things on the roof, and then I'm going to leave that to dry. And this is how the board's looking as of now. All the awesome debris, ballast, and bits are glued down, and it's ready for priming. With this all primed black, it's looking even more cohesive than before. And the next step is now to paint everything up. First things first, using a brush on this large of a surface would be a pain in the ass unless you had a giant brush. But even then, you'd only be able to get paint down in little strips and likely be left with brush marks. To solve this, I'm using a foam sponge to not only get the paint down faster, but to distribute it in a random textured pattern that mimics concrete. I'm using a variety of grays, tans, and lighter cream colors, and I'm randomly applying those all over the concrete area. Next, I start to paint up the walls of the gas station, and while the color is similar to the concrete, I'm going to come in with some extra tan to help differentiate it from the pavement. The sponge tip lets me get nice and close to the base of the walls without getting tons of paint on the rubble. It also lets me get close to the tops of the walls as well. I'm turning the board to help me get into all the edges, nooks, and crannies as I work my way around the building. Switching over to my gas pump cover, I'm introducing my first pop of color with a nice red along the top edge. I'm using this as a sort of quick test to see if I like the color and look before I add it to the gas station, which I then do. Again, I'm using the sponge to get a nice clean line, and I'm not afraid to put the board at different sides and angles to make the paint job easier. While I have the red on my palette, I decided to add it to the gas pumps themselves, starting with the mangled one on top of the crushed car in the street. I'm using a brush for this since the detail is smaller and requires more precision. I'm making sure that I hit all the gas pump material and not the base, which is actually concrete. Speaking of differentiating material, I'm turning my focus to the crushed car in the street and the surrounding rubble. Based on how the car is recessed into the concrete in the road, it would make sense that dirt and earth was thrown up into the surrounding area. I'm covering this in a brown color with a large brush to make it look like this. In the spirit of blocking out different materials, I grabbed some silver and hit the window frame along with the doors as well. I also decided to grab the edges of the ladder with this silver color too. For the smooth window panes, I'm going to be grabbing a dark blue and giving those a quick coat to create the appearance of glass. This is a bit trickier because I wanted to get all the way into the edges of those windows, but because the panes are a bit recessed within the frames, I have to approach it with some awkward angles in order to do so. Now, the rubble around the gas station base needs to be addressed, and with how fine the texture is, if I just dry brush it, I'm going to get a grainy look that I don't really want. But good news for you, I have a nifty trick for situations just like this. While I do thin my paint down with water to help get it into all the crevices, it's easy to make it too thick and then accidentally lose all the detail of whatever you're painting. So I just do the reverse. Add some water to the area, and then I apply my already thinned paint down, and it seeps into all the gravel and texture like magic. I especially like this technique because I want the ground beneath the gravel to look like the concrete that I've already painted up. I want to get this smashed car painted up, and I decided on a nice green color. And for the cracked windows, I'm going to be using some of that same blue color that I used on the gas station doors and window. I also block out the stones with a lighter tan color to look like chunks of the concrete. The trick to incorporating pre-created pieces of terrain into a scene or a diorama that you're working on is to pay attention to what that pre-made terrain has on it, dirt or concrete or whatever, and then what's around it in the scene that you've created. For example, in my head, the car that's crushed in the road, before it was crushed, went up on the curb. So it's halfway in the road, halfway on the concrete. Then it got crushed, and whatever's around that would be thrown up, whether it's the earth beneath the concrete itself, maybe some asphalt. Whatever it is, thinking through your terrain like this can help you make good decisions that end up unifying the whole scene that you're trying to make, rather than it looking like you simply glued on a piece of terrain to your board or diorama. I wrap up the car by hitting it with a bright green color to really make it pop on the board. Looking at the road, it seemed a bit empty, so I decided to add a white road line using the very tip of my sponge. With the car on the road done, I only have a final few touches that I want to add. Because the rooftops are playable areas in Marvel Crisis Protocol, I want the debris on the roof of the gas station to have a little bit of character. I'm going to grab some random colors that I already have on my wet palette. I'm going to pick out some of the details like the panels, those little metal bars, and a couple pieces of wood. These aren't the focus of the board, but I think adding little colors and details here and there can really help to tie the whole thing together and can add to the look of the whole board. Now for the part that I've been looking forward to probably the most, and that's adding the UV resin. I'm dripping it around the base of the gas pump that had been ripped out and thrown on the car. I decided to add a drop of red ink to this to simulate a gross swirly pool of gas, and as I shine the UV light on this, I realized it's a little bit too bright and it doesn't look quite right. But gas often looks like a multitude of colors depending on the light that is shining on it. So I grabbed some contrast paint, Colia green and Reichland flesh shade, and I pooled that over the top, which I think actually made it turn out pretty convincing. The last step is to glue the gas pump cover into place, and this tile board is ready for gaming. And that's tile 1 done. A sick, wrecked gas station, cracked pavement, battle damage, a crushed car, and a fuel spill that I think looks legit. And not only does it look cool, but it's playable too. Ignore the fact that I'm using Shatterpoint minis on this. Your boy ran out of time and didn't have time to assemble any heroes or villains to put on the board. But that does sound like another video idea. I'm thrilled with how this turned out, and it's already got me excited to do the next tile. Now, I don't have any idea yet what that tile is going to be, but I've got a whole box of Earth's Mightiest terrain left to dig through. So drop a comment if you've got ideas for what you want to see me build next. If you found this video helpful, or you just enjoyed watching me stumble through my own problems and then solve those problems, drop a like and subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel out a ton. I'm also going to have the Marvel Crisis Protocol starter kit, the UV resin, and all the other goodies that I used today linked down in the description below. Those are affiliate links which give a little extra kickback to the channel at no extra cost to you. And thanks for hanging out with me today, I really appreciate it. I'm going to be back again soon with a new video, but until then, keep on crafting.